Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm Patrick Reyes, and thank you for joining us today. Now, just last week was World Glaucoma Week, and on today's show, we are joined with Geoff Pollard, who is the CEO of Glaucoma Australia. Now, if you haven't guessed it by now, we'll be talking about glaucoma in Australia, how that affects us, a little bit about the World Glaucoma Week, and some new technology now meant for Australians living with glaucoma. Welcome to the show, Geoff.
Thank you, Patrick. Nice to be here.
Now, can you tell us more about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yes, I'm the Executive Officer for Glaucoma Australia, which is a national not-for-profit charity dedicated to creating awareness about what is a potentially sight-debilitating disease. The Glaucoma Australia has been around since 1988, and our mission is to eliminate glaucoma blindness by ensuring that people are detected early enough so they won't go blind.
What is glaucoma?
So glaucoma is actually a complex disease, but I hope I can give you a simple explanation and probably a little bit about the eye in the first case. So when the light or the image falls into the eye, it focuses on the back of the eye, which is a whole lot of cells which convert that image into an electric signal. And that signal is sent by the nerve fibers down what's called the optic nerve to the brain. And the brain actually sorts out what you're seeing. So you see with your brain, not with your eyes. If that optic nerve is damaged in any way, that is when you are called to have glaucoma. So it's damage to the optic nerve that is the diagnosis rather than any other risk factors you may have for glaucoma. What will happen if you have damage to the optic nerve is the vision you see is missing. So you might have missing parts or no vision at all if you're blind. And the thing about glaucoma is that it's a bit sneaky, and the brain fills in those missing bits for you for quite a long time. So you may not know you have glaucoma yourself. You can't really self-diagnose it. So in that way, it's a complex disease.
I see. Now, you did mention the risk factors. What are some of the risk factors for glaucoma?
So probably the most important risk factor is whether you have high pressure inside your eye or not. So there's pressure in the eye because it's pumping fluid into the eye and pumping fluid out of the eye all the time. And the reason you have fluid going in and out of the eye is it brings the oxygen and all the nutrients for the cell. So if you have imbalance of that and too much fluid in the eye than you should have, you have high pressure, and that pressure can push back onto the head of the optic nerve and can damage the nerve at that point and can actually make you have glaucoma as a result. So high pressure is not glaucoma, but the results of the damage from the high pressure is what is glaucoma. Secondly, family history is an important determinant of whether you will have glaucoma yourself. You have about a 10 times greater risk of having glaucoma yourself if you have a direct relative like a brother or a sister or a parent in your family who already has been diagnosed with glaucoma. And that works out to be about a 1 in 4 chance in your lifetime of having glaucoma yourself, which is certainly quite a high risk. So it's almost a 25% chance there. And so that's a very significant risk factor because it's thought that about 50% of all glaucoma is genetically related. Other risk factors are of lesser value, but they certainly exist. Whether you have long or short-sightedness, whether you have low or high blood pressure also affects whether you have glaucoma risk, that's elevated, and also whether you have diabetes has got a mild chance of increasing the risk of having glaucoma.
Now, I did mention earlier, how was the World Glaucoma Week that just happened?
So we're still reviewing how we went, and we don't quite have a good handle on number of increased appointments that people may have made to have eye checks. But we certainly know that our website traffic has been very high, and the number of phone calls to our organisation have increased as well. So that, in our terms, is a pretty good result. People are talking about glaucoma as a result of those awareness activities, and people have been asking us questions and looking at our information, which is a fantastic result.
Yeah, that's definitely some positive news. What is the website where people can go to?
So it's glaucoma.org.au. So usually the W's in front, and then glaucoma.org.au. And there's a whole lot of information there that people can have a look at, whether they've got glaucoma or not, and whether they're at risk of having glaucoma. Because there's about 300,000 people in Australia who actually have glaucoma. The sad thing is half of those people don't know it, because as we were talking earlier about the brain being sneaky, glaucoma is often called the sneak thief of sight, because the brain, as I said, hides the fact that you can't see an image, and you could lose 40% of your nerve cells in the back of your eye before you actually notice the difference. That's why early detection is so important before you actually have sight loss. You can still have glaucoma and not have sight loss if you are treated properly. Most people could expect the disease to be halted or certainly slowed down quite significantly. But if you're not detected, and obviously if you're not being treated actively, there's much greater potential that you will lose significant sight, including going blind. And there's approximately about 11,000 people in Australia at any one time who are blind directly as a result of glaucoma. It is entirely preventable if they are detected early.
I see. So, yeah, like you said, it is treatable just as long as it's detected at an earlier stage. What are some of the newer treatments that we have today?
Yes, so I guess the newer treatments supplement the older treatments, which have been eye drops, and there's been surgery, and there's been laser procedures. Some of the newer procedures coming through are what are called a group of procedures called MIGS. So MIGS means micro-invasive glaucoma surgery. And they're in some ways like stents in your eye. So if you're familiar with stents in your arteries in your heart, this is in some ways similar. The idea is to actually relieve the pressure in your eye, even if you start off having normal pressure. That may be too high for you if you have glaucoma. And so you can either work on reducing the amount of fluid going into the eye, or you can increase the amount of fluid going out of the eye. So these stents increase the amount of fluid going out of the eye by creating another drain in your eye to get rid of that fluid, and that may be helpful.
Now, are those the only advantages or benefits to having those stents?
No, there's a good chance you may actually be able to get off drops. So the standard treatment for glaucoma is actually to start with drops. Okay. And you may actually have a whole lot of drops. So instead of having one type of drop, you might have 2 or 3 or 4 or even more drops over the course of a day. So that's quite a pain to do that, and the adherence to drops is pretty low in Australia. So about half the people who are prescribed drops stop taking it within 12 months. So if you can actually have something that doesn't require drops, there may be some advantages to actually, adhering to medication or adhering to your treatment. You also may be able to avoid the more invasive surgical procedures that can be used for people with more severe glaucoma. And you could also potentially lower the cost over your lifetime. If you just had these and didn't have to buy drops for many, many years, you might actually in the end receive some kind of benefit as a result of not spending that kind of money.
And our listeners can find more information about these stents on your website?
There's certainly a little overview of that, and an overview of all the treatment procedures such as drops and operations and so forth. People can have a good look around that. And there's also information about what is glaucoma and how to look after yourself a bit more.
All right. For our listeners that have missed the website, it's again www.glaucoma.org.au. Now, before we end the segment, can you tell us any misconceptions that either patients or just the public have had about glaucoma?
I think one of the main ones is people have considered it to be an older person's disease. Whilst the incidence of glaucoma does increase with age, and it is a disease of aging, it can happen to anyone. About 1 in 10,000 babies are born with glaucoma, what's called congenital glaucoma. And by the time people are age 40, about 0.5% of 40-year-olds will have glaucoma. So the important thing is to be detected early, and so go and see your optometrist usually, sometimes your ophthalmologist if you have specific concerns about your eyes, and get a baseline check, which should be a very comprehensive check for glaucoma, among other eye diseases, and then ask that eye health professional how often you should return. And the important thing is to stick with it so you do keep getting followed up rather than going, I didn't have glaucoma now, I must be okay, because in 2 years' time you might have glaucoma.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, Geoff.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. Now, you've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Patrick Reyes, and we've been in conversation with Geoff Pollard as we talked about glaucoma in Australia, the World Glaucoma Week, and also about new technology like the stents that were just mentioned earlier. Now, if you've missed our conversation or if you'd like to listen to this interview again, transcripts and audio of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au and also at hpr.fm, and you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes.